Should the New York Giants run it back with Daniel Jones in 2024? I'll give you my thoughts on the matter. Plus, I have for you a potential offensive line coaching candidate that's not getting enough buzz, and the latest on the Wink Martindale saga, which came to an end on Wednesday. That's all coming your way next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the promo code LockedOnNFL, written in all lowercase letters, for a first deposit match up to $100. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. My name's Patricia Chen, a credentialed member of the New York Giants media. I write for Giants Country over at FanNation.com. And of course, I am here for you on Locked On Giants 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And I want to send a shout out and a special welcome to my Blue Crew community members, my everydayers, my newcomers, and everybody in between. Y'all are appreciated and loved. So thank you for making us your first listen of the day, or if you watch on YouTube, your first watch of the day. On today's show, I'm going to tackle the question. I know it's going to get some feedback, some pushback, but I'm going to tackle it, and I'm going to explain why I'm tackling it in just a moment. But should the Giants run it back in 2024 with Daniel Jones? I've got some theories as to how this is going to potentially play out, depending on how certain circumstances turn, specifically Daniel Jones's health. So I'll talk about that up front. And then in the second segment, I have the name of an offensive line coach that I don't think a whole lot of people are talking about as a possibility for the Giants. And this guy, I did some research on his credentials. He's got some pretty impressive credentials. So we'll talk about him in the second segment. And then finally, in the last segment, the Wink Martindale drama is over. What happened? I'll fill in some more details for you, and then we'll call it a show. So thank you, as always, for tuning in. Let's get started. Should the Giants run it back with Daniel Jones? Now, here's the thing. Joe Schoen, general manager, Brian Daboll, they have both indicated that once Daniel Jones is healthy, he will be the starter. The goal is for Daniel Jones to be ready by week 1. Of course, Jones is rehabbing from his torn ACL. Now, a lot of people are saying to me, well, Pat, if that's the case, does that mean the Giants won't draft a quarterback? No, that's not necessarily the case. I think if you're the Giants, you have to draft a quarterback, preferably in the first round, because here's how I see this potentially playing out. You bring back Daniel Jones, obviously, because of his salary cap hit. Okay, he's not going to get cut. And once he's healthy, yes, you let him start the season, regardless if you take a quarterback in the first round. But you let Daniel Jones be the placeholder. All right. So what I would say is you let Jones, if he is healthy, play in 2024 until he shows that he's just an absolute disaster and he's not improved and he can't overcome, the lack of blocking or drops or injuries or whatever excuse that you want to make for him. At that point, if you have a rookie that you have preferably taken either with a first or second round pick, then you maybe make the transition. And I've mentioned this before. It's the Eli Manning principle, what the Giants did with Eli Manning when he was a rookie. Now, you're probably saying, okay, well, then what? Here's the thing. If you give Jones, assuming that he is ready by week 1 from his injury, you give him a few weeks, all right? Then come the trade deadline. Why not see if you can move him? If you feel that the rookie is ready, you see if you can move Daniel Jones. Get rid of some of that guaranteed salary that's clogging up the salary cap. And who knows, maybe you get a draft pick or two. I mean, because by then you figure there'll be injuries around the league at quarterback. And then, what you can do is obviously you can roll with Tommy DeVito if he is QB2, if he designates himself as QB2. And then if you have a veteran on board or on your practice squad, you just bring him up. Now, look, I know that that's a wild scenario. That probably will not happen. But the bottom line is that the Giants are at a crossroads with Daniel Jones. He did regress last year. All right. Regardless of what anybody says, and you can blame the injuries, you can blame this, you can blame that, the offensive line, whatever you want, blame you want to give him. The bottom line is the guy went backwards. And I will mention that, the offensive line blocking wasn't that great the year prior when Jones had, a better year. Jones is still guilty of staring down receivers. Most of his reads are the first read. Most of his throws are of the short variety. I saw a stat on Sports Info Solutions. 68% of his throws this year were made in the short range. All right. Jones, to me, is a limited quarterback. And I wanted to believe that he could be the guy. I wanted to believe that he could be the answer, the long-term answer like Eli Manning was. I don't see it, folks. I've got to be honest with you. I know some of you are Jones supporters out there and you say, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. I don't see it. Too many mistakes, too skittish in the pocket. I just feel like at this point, Jones would be better off trying someplace else, starting fresh and see if he can't tap into the skill set that he has. Now, here's the other thing with Jones. The ACL obviously is going to affect his mobility. That's got to be a concern. And as I've mentioned before, the Giants have the 6th overall pick in the draft order. They have no idea where they're going to be picking the following year. So to say, okay, you know what, skip taking a quarterback this year because you can always get one next year. You don't know where you're going to be drafting. So I think you kind of have to strike while the iron's hot and while you're in position. Now, will the Giants be able to get one of the top quarterbacks like Caleb Williams or Drake May? Probably not, unless they trade up. Would Jaden Daniels be an option? Probably not, especially if somebody jumps ahead of them. So the Giants might have to move up one spot to ensure that, they get or have a shot at Jaden Daniels if he's the guy that they want. But, to me, you've got to take a quarterback. Jones has an escape hatch in his contract. I've mentioned this before. The team can get out of it after 2024. And I think if they get a rookie quarterback, that's going to tell us a lot about what their intention is. Even though Joe Shane said at his presser, oh, we've got all kinds of confidence in Daniel Jones. I still believe in him, blah, blah, blah. Actions are going to speak louder than words. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Giants do in the offseason. And, I asked Shane, and interestingly, he didn't answer the question. He kind of danced around it. But I asked him, I said, is there a specific deadline in your mind to where you say, okay, if Daniel is, say, I don't know, 30% healed by the start of free agency, you go free agency, or if he's 40% healed by the draft, do you go draft? Are there milestones that you're looking at? And Shane didn't really answer it, but I'm sure in his mind, he knows that, depending on Daniel's rehab and where he's at a little later on in the year, that's going to influence what they end up doing and how they approach it. And quite frankly, folks, I think of the two routes, being veteran or a draft pick, if you're rebuilding, truly rebuilding, and can we agree that the offense last year was so badly broken that it needs to be rebuilt? Get a rookie quarterback in here on his rookie contract. Then, next year you get rid of Daniel Jones. Your cap is a lot healthier. And then you continue to build. You build around that kid. Shane said, oh, we want to build around Daniel Jones. Build around a quarterback, period. The end of the day, the job of the quarterback is to push the ball down the field and move the chains. So none of this, oh my God, they have to specifically build around Daniel Jones because he's got one skill set versus, let's say, for example, Jaden Daniels, who has another skill set. No, you build around the system and the guy that's running the system. So, that's how I see this playing out. I see almost like a rerun, if you will, of Eli Manning's last year, where he became kind of an expensive backup to Daniel Jones when he was a rookie. I could see that playing out for the Giants, unless, like I said, they could potentially trade him to a team, assuming, again, that he's healthy, assuming that they draft a rookie in the first round and that rookie is ready to go, and they have a backup option that can step in if the rookie struggles. But that's how I can kind of see it playing out with the Giants. So to answer the question, should the Giants run it back with Daniel Jones? I think they will. But that doesn't mean they're going to run it back this year and next year and the year after that. I think there's going to be a transition period for the Giants and Daniel Jones, to where eventually there's going to be a parting of the ways, whether it's, like I said, midway through the 2024 season or after that, there's going to be some kind of parting of ways. I'd be shocked if there wasn't. All right, coming up next, I'm going to tell you about an offensive line coaching candidate that I don't think has been mentioned a whole lot. Did some research on this guy, pretty impressive credentials. I'll tell you all about him right after this. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Around New Year's, we get obsessed with how to change ourselves instead of just expanding on what we're already doing right. Maybe you finally organized a part of your space and you want to tackle another. Or maybe you're taking your supplements every morning and now you want to actually eat breakfast too. Therapy helps you find your strengths so that you can ditch the extreme resolutions and make the changes that will really stick. And if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online and is designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge if you find that your assigned therapist isn't a match. So go on and celebrate the progress that you've made with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you all day, every day, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe for the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. And in this segment, I'm going to give you the name of an offensive line coach that I don't know if a lot of people have mentioned. I know there's been a ton of articles written by members of the New York media, including us over at Giant Country, about candidates that we think could potentially replace Bobby Johnson, who was fired on Monday. And one such guy, it's funny, that I was kind of eyeing at the pro rank was Dwayne Ledford of the Atlanta Falcons. That was the guy who, as I was doing research for different candidates, I said, oh, that guy, he has a pretty good resume, has worked wonders with the Falcons offensive line. And plus, the Falcons just fired their head coach. So who knows if, that head coach is going to retain him. But of course, word came out that the Giants did put in an interview request for Ledford and Atlanta blocked it. Oh, well. So who might the Giants look at? Well, I'm going to give you the name of a college coach. That's right. I went into the college ranks to find a guy that I think is very intriguing. And that guy is Washington Huskies offensive line coach, Scott Huff, who he has been the offensive line coach for the Huskies since 2017. The Huskies, the 2023 Joe Moore Award, which honors the best offensive line in the country. Huff has sent 7 players to the NFL. For example, Jackson Kirkland of the Bengals played for him. His offensive line helped the Huskies to finish 5th in the nation in fewest sacks allowed. All right, 12 sacks in 15 games. And the Huskies offense behind that offensive line led the nation in passing offense. They were 12th in total offense, part of the 10th best scoring offense, 11th best third down offense, and ninth in fourth down conversions. All right. So, what are some of the appealing things besides what I just quoted to you about Scott Huff? All right. Let's start off with the development of young players. What do the Giants currently have on their roster? All right. They have primarily young players. Evan Neal is still kind of young and wet behind the ears. Joshua Ezeudu, Marcus McKethan is young, still young and wet behind the ears. They will probably add another guy, I would think, in the draft. They will probably add, a veteran, I would think, maybe during free agency, towards the second or third wave of free agency. And then they have Andrew Thomas, who, while not a graybeard, is probably, or not probably, he is the most experienced and the best of the batch. So my thought process, and it's funny, the Giants tried this with Rob Sale and it didn't really work. And I think the reason why it didn't work is because Rob Sale just couldn't help guys make the leap from, from college level to the pros. Scott Huff, I think, can. All right. He has developed young offensive linemen into quality players. And here's something that, as part of the research that I did, that really jumped out at me because I think it's applicable to the Giants. The Giants, as you know, have a lot of injuries and offensive line injuries that necessitate the shakeup of the offensive line. Well, at Washington this past year, Scott Huff orchestrated 4 different combinations of his offensive line with 7 different players, and they didn't miss a beat. All right. So he can get guys cross-trained and get them ready. I like the fact that, the technique that he teaches cuts down on the sacks and the quarterback pressures. Just a lot to like about Scott Huff as a potential candidate. Now, would he be interested in coming to the Giants in the NFL? Don't know. Would Brian Daboll have interest in speaking with him? Don't know that either. But he is an intriguing candidate because right now it's funny. The Giants have already, like I said, been blocked from talking to Dwayne Ledford. And I believe the former Carolina, or not the former Carolina, I think he's still on Carolina's staff, and the name escapes me. I think their offensive line coach was also rumored to be part of Daboll's interest, and they blocked him as well because they want to see what the new coach that they hire, if they want to retain these guys. So I think if you're the Giants, you maybe have to think about going to the college ranks because you do have young players. You need to get these guys, build up their confidence. And if you can get an offensive line coach who has worked with young players, as Scott Huff has, maybe, just maybe, you can get some of these guys who have fallen so far off the track back on track. And I'm thinking specifically in terms of Evan Neal, who through 2 years, I think we can all agree, has not been working out for this team. And if, Joe Shane and Brian Daboll want to run it back with him at right tackle, if they believe he is a right tackle, before, he turns into a bust, get a guy in here who can optimize his talents because right now it ain't happening. So they've got to get somebody in here who can not only, teach Evan Neal, but just reach him because, the more they struggle, the more frustrated they get. And just everything that I've researched about Scott Huff, the more I read about him, the more I thought, oh, you've got to see if he's interested. So hopefully he will get a call from the Giants. And if he doesn't, I'm sure Daboll will pick the next best guy. I would hope he would. But this Scott Huff definitely intrigues me as a potential offensive line coach for the Giants. All right, folks, coming up next, we'll wrap it up with the end of the Wink Martindale Giants stalemate and a few other thoughts on the coaching carousel that's going on right now with the Giants. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Hey, Giant fans, I know we come to sports to escape from some of the crazy realities of real life, but can we just talk about that for a minute? According to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics like amoxicillin right in the middle of the worst flu season in over a decade. This is scary. And I can't imagine a more helpless feeling than if I or someone I loved got sick while a supply chain issue kept them from getting the life-saving medication they needed. Thankfully, we'll be okay because of Jace Medical. The Jace case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including UTIs, respiratory infections, sinusitis, skin infections, and others. This stuff could happen to any of us. So visit jacemedical.com today and complete your physician encounter. It will be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medications, once approved, will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular costs. It's never been more important to be prepared than today. So go to jacemedical.com and use the offer code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your order. That's Jace Medical, spelled Jase medical.com. And again, that offer code for $20 off your order is Locked On. All right, everybody. Welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I am your host, Patricia Traina. You can follow me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Patricia_Traina, Traina. You can also follow me on Threads and Instagram at Patty Traina, PattiTraina. I post daily over there as well, several times a day, actually. So hope to see you over there. And coming up on the Locked On Giants podcast tomorrow, I'm going to have Ed Valentine on the show, A Big Blue View. We're going to do a crossover between our shows, and we're going to talk about, obviously, all that's been going on since the Giants season ended, as well as spin ahead to the future. So that's going to be my recorded show for Friday. And then Friday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern, Locked On Giants Live, Taina, Dog. That's right. We're going to have Taina on, Dog's going to be on, and oh boy, do we have a lot to talk about. And of course, as part of Locked On Giants Live, which is aired on YouTube, and then later, we play the audio on our audio platforms. What we will do is we will take your questions. So if you show up and you're registered for the chat, you can drop questions into the chat box. And usually we do that, after, like, towards the end of the show, we start answering questions. But we love interacting with our people who come in and listen to the show and watch the show. And we hope you will as well. Usually that show runs about a couple of hours. So it's a lengthy one, but we have a lot of fun and it does go fast. So anyway, let's get back to the agenda for today's Locked On Giants podcast. And that is just a quick summary of the Wink Martindale standoff having ended, plus a couple of other updates on coaching. For those of you who are on YouTube, you probably saw I posted a short that the Giants and Wink Martindale mutually agreed to part ways. The terms of the deal was that Martindale, who has one more year left on his contract, will not collect the $3 million that was owed to him in 2024. He will, however, be free to go to any other team. And I know a lot of people are panicking about that. They're like, oh my God, what if he goes to the Eagles? Folks, the Eagles defense had its share of struggles this year, as I recall, right? And, maybe not to the degree that the Giants did at times, but look, you got to have faith that the Giants are going to get better. And it's also going to be interesting to see if the Eagles, change up their personnel or their philosophies if they were to hire Martindale. We don't even know for a fact if that's going to be the case. Maybe Martindale tries to get a head coaching job and gets consideration for a head coaching job. So I wouldn't panic about where he ends up. I really wouldn't at this point. I think I'd be more concerned if, say, for example, Dan Quinn left Dallas to take the Seattle head coaching job, which just opened up now that Pete Carroll won't be back. And Wink went to Dallas and was able to work with Micah Parsons and those guys. That might concern me a little bit more than the Eagles. So let's just, keep our fingers crossed that doesn't happen. All right. A couple of other coaching notes. The Giants are looking to bring in guys to interview for their openings, and they reached out to the Chargers. They wanted to talk to their special teams coordinator, Ryan Ficken, and the Chargers blocked them. I mentioned in the previous segment that Dwayne Ledford, the offensive line coach from Atlanta, they had inquired about interviewing him, and that request was blocked. Kind of weird, I'll tell you. Antonio Pierce, I know, was mentioned as a potential candidate for the Giants defensive coordinator position, assuming that the Raiders are willing to grant him permission to interview. The only activity I've heard regarding Pierce is I believe he's got an interview with the Tennessee Titans, who fired Mike Vrabel. And interestingly, Mike Kafka is getting an interview from the Tennessee Titans. How about that, right? So we'll see what happens there. But let me go back to the Giants special teams group for a moment, because, we've talked about offensive line coaches, and I've written, that was written about over on Giants Country. I know we talked about potential defensive coordinators. Let's talk about some potential special teams coaches they might want to look at. And I'll give you a few. Larry Izzo might be a guy. He's currently the Seattle special teams coordinator. He was actually an assistant special teams coach with the Giants a few years ago, before I think he went to Houston after he left the Giants to take a full-time, special teams coordinator role versus an assistant like he was here. I don't know if Izzo would be available. Again, I'm not sure what the Seahawks are going to be doing there, if they're going to block their assistants from interviewing, but certainly that would be an option. Nate Kazor, who was with the Commanders, I think he should be available. Darius Swinton, who's the Raiders assistant special teams coach. Phil Galliano, the Saints assistant special teams coach. Now remember, if they are an assistant, if they have assistant in their name, their title, and they get promoted to coordinator, technically, yeah, that is a promotion. So I'm kind of surprised, with some of these other coaches that, maybe the Giants haven't put in to request that they be for example, defensive coordinator / assistant head coach or associate head coach. So, that's a way around that. But bottom line is the team needs to, approve a guy who is under contract. And right now, it doesn't seem like the league is willing to play ball with the Giants. So it's going to be interesting what direction Brian Daboll goes in regarding these assistant coaching hires that he has. And he's got a bunch to make, offensive line, defensive coordinator, special teams, running backs coach, strength and conditioning. And those are just the ones we know of. Will Kafka leave? Then he would have offensive coordinator. And wouldn't that be a disaster if now Daboll has to replace all three coordinators? Goodness, that's going to be a really tough pill to swallow. And Kafka, you guys, if you've been listening to me, that was the one that I was pretty sure was not going to be back. He's the last man standing currently. But, if he goes, they're going to have a very interesting, and rocky, I think, at any rate, start to the year next year, because new guys, new philosophies, new systems. The offensive system will probably be the same as last year, because that's technically Daboll's system, but just what a mess it could potentially be for the Giants. So curious to see how it all plays out. Daboll will get it figured out. He always does, I guess, and we'll just see what he comes up with over these next couple of weeks. I would think by the end of the month, they would want to have their coaching staff mostly in place, especially before they start going out to all-star games and whatnot. So anyway, that will do it for today's Locked On Giants podcast. As always, thank you for making us your first listen of the day, or if you watch on YouTube, your first watch of the day. Appreciate your feedback and your comments and the love that you guys send. And I hope tomorrow you will tune in to Locked On Giants Live. Again, that'll be 7:30 p.m. Eastern. And I also hope you will check out tomorrow's recorded show. So actually, you're getting 6 shows from me this week. Again, Ed Valentine with Big Blue View will be my guest, and we'll just talk about the Giants, where they go from here. And I'm sure I'll be on Ed's show as well. So you can check that out as well if you'd like to. All right, everybody, I'm Patricia Traina, and I will see you all tomorrow on the Locked On Giants podcast.